this computer. Okay, let's just try that. Okay, we'll start doing this one. And first of all, today's topics. We have Invictus, which is not a song, not a popular American song, but it's a real bona fide English poet whose name was William Ernest Hanley. He was an intellectual and he wrote a lot of books and poems and he did a lot of things. However, right now, everyone in the world knows that he wrote Invictus, and the people, 99% of people who know him do not know anything else about him because this poem is so very famous and it's really inspired the whole world how to work hard towards your goal despite everything else. This is a very, very inspiring poem. And I chose Yang Wanli's poem called the 桂圆谱. It's saying exactly the same thing, but in a less graphic detail. It's more spiritual than physical because William Hanley really felt the bloodiness of struggling despite everything else. So these are a very good match. And to add something else to this class, I thought about Galileo and Hu Shi. We will talk about them when the time comes. So right now, first thing first is the vocabulary, and I've sent it to you all, the handout for this class. If you want to get this handout, please contact me so that I can add your email address to my list. And we're going to go through this list. This time we just start with the vocabulary instead of adding something else before the vocabulary. The first word is badminton, which is 羽毛球. Huh? 羽毛球is very similar to tennis, but tennis has a larger racket, stronger skills, and much more, it's either on the hierarchy of sports, 羽毛球 is low, very low down there, while tennis is at the top of it. Tennis is a more famous, more respected sport, while 羽毛球, badminton, is more a family-oriented. Though there are international tournaments of 羽毛球, of badminton, but it's not as much as tennis was. Badminton is a racket sport. A racket sport is a sport that you use a 球拍, huh? So racket sport could be a tennis and badminton and ping pong. Okay, these are sports you play with a racket in your hand. Each player has a racket and they hit something between two players, and so if it's a single match, you would have two players, each one with his or her own racket. So you're using a racket, 就是一个球拍了哈. Then you're hitting not a tennis ball, but a shuttlecock. Shuttle is when you're weaving, 织布的时候有个织布机哈. On a weaving loom, that's called a loom, a loom. You sit there in front of a loom. Of course, if you are a huge factory, you would have a whole big room with lots of looms around. But personally, if you're doing it in your home, you would have a loom and you would sit in front of a loom and you would push through a shuttle. Left and right, left and right. So when you're weaving, 就是织布的时候，或者是织地毯哈, either you're weaving a fabric or a rug or a carpet, you would use a shuttle with a thread attached to it. Then the shuttle would go left and right and left and right. That's what a shuttle is called. That's why you have shuttle bus, and that's why you have space shuttle. That in all these instances, the shuttle is the thing that goes between two places, back and forth, the same trip. They don't go to anywhere else. They go from the Earth to the spaceship, or they go on the bus or train locally. They don't go to a faraway place. They just locally go between 2 points. That's called a shuttle. The shuttlecock is the name of 羽毛球. As you can see on the right, in the beginning they use feathers on it, so they call it a cock because it looks like a bird was flying, and it flies back and forth between the two players. Each of them would have a racket in their hand, and they hit the shuttlecock across a net. Okay, this picture is a picture of 4 feather shuttlecocks. But nowadays, you probably would use a shuttlecock that's not made of feathers. It's made of plastic like this. And this would last a long time. You can use it to play game after game, maybe 20 or even 100 games using the same shuttlecock. However, it's not as good as the feather one. So the real professionals, they would rather use a feather shuttlecock. And in that case, it would not last more than 1 game. Usually halfway into a game, it's already too damaged to be accurate. So you have to have lots of spare ones. This is a picture of 2 rackets for badminton. Okay. The next word is appall, which means it's terrifyingly terrible. Okay. When you say that I'm appalled to see this, that means that you were shocked by this terrible thing. So in the dictionary, the word appall would mean to fill with horror. So you are filled with horror. It's not that something else fill you with horror. It is a intransitive verb, but it can also be a transitive verb. 就是可以是及物动词，也可以是不及物动词哈。To make, you can make somebody to feel this is appalling, or you can yourself feel this appalling thing. And similar words can be terrify, daunt, frighten, scare, depress. These are all very strong words, verbs, that means you feel very strongly and badly about something. And when I was doing this list, I came across an article on Time magazine that was talking about the new West Side Story. It is a movie, a musical made by Steven Spielberg that has just opened last week. And the person who wrote the script is Tony Kushner. Tony Kushner is a very, very well respected gay writer. He was most famous for having written Angels in America. It was a great play, and it later became a movie with many famous actors involved with this project. And Tony Kushner accepted Steven Spielberg's invitation to rewrite the script for the musical called West Side Story. West Side Story was made into a movie 60 years ago, and it was really, really good and famous, and so many people already saw it and liked it. So it is kind of strange for Steven Spielberg to want to remake a movie that was so good, because how much better can you make it? But Tony Kushner was moved to accept this invitation or challenge because he thinks he could do better. And in the process of making this movie, he came across this idea of inviting Rita Moreno to play a role in this movie. And Rita Moreno was from Puerto Rico, and the story was about Puerto Rico gang and Italian youth gangs, the two of them fighting for territories in New York City. So you have a Puerto Rican gang and an Italian gang. They were so-called juvenile delinquents, 就是不良少年哈，他们在一起打架，最后当然就打出了事情。And that story was based on Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. And Rita Moreno was the first Latino actress to ever have won an Oscar. That's it, yeah. To have ever won an Oscar. So she was very famous, and she was lovely in the original movie for playing the brother's girlfriend. In this story, you have a Romeo and a Juliet. So you have a young man and a young woman coming from different background, and the young man belongs to this Italian gang, and the young woman, her brother, is part of the Puerto Rican gang, street gang, 就是像我们说竹联帮或者什么帮哈，这些年轻人的帮派，fighting for territory in a big city. And Rita Moreno is the girlfriend of the central actress, who's Juliet. That was she was called Maria, and she was played by Natalie Wood. And Rita Moreno was so very well received, especially because she won an Oscar for that role, that to be able to invite Rita Moreno to the new movie would be a big, big plus for this movie. So when Tony Kushner thought about this idea, he told Steven Spielberg about this idea, and Steven Spielberg was so excited that he couldn't help but to go right away and ask Rita Moreno for her permission. Okay, and the story behind this is Tony Kushner does not know Spanish. He could not write any dialogue in Spanish. What he did was he wrote the whole thing, and all the lines that needs to be translated, he took it to Google Translate and came back with a translation and stick into that script. So this is a horrible, horrible thing to read for people who read Spanish, because the translation was very, very bad. Okay, so Steven Spielberg gave the first draft of the script to Rita Moreno, and she was appalled. Here I have this word, appalled. This is appalling. So when I saw this, I have to quote the whole thing for you to see how then you should be able to remember how to use the word appalling. This is appalling. That's what Rita Moreno said. She said, "What kind of Spanish is this? There's not a single line that is remotely similar to what we speak in Puerto Rico. This is terrible Spanish." And of course, Tony Kushner had to apologize to her again and again. And he's working with a person called Julio Monge. I don't know how to say Julio Monge or Monge. I guess Monge. That was a dancer in that movie, and he was from Puerto Rico. So Tony Kushner worked very hard every day with this Julio so that they could change all the Spanish lines into Spanish, a real Spanish that was being spoken in Puerto Rico. That's a very interesting story. So I'm telling you this story. And the very special thing about the Spanish in this movie is not only that Tony Kushner spent so much time translating each line, not from Google Translate, but from a real Puerto Rican who helped him in every way to make it a good Spanish line. And the big thing about this is not this. It is that when you go to see a movie, most people don't speak Spanish, and you don't see any subtitle in this movie. When the people on the screen are speaking in Spanish, you are totally lost because there's no subtitle. Let me put the word subtitle here. There are no subtitles. Subtitles 就是另外一国的字幕 So when you go see the movie, when the people are speaking in Puerto Rican language, which is Spanish, but in their own special way, there are no subtitles to help you. And the trick that Tony Kushner had to work hard to do is that other things around it would make you understand what this Spanish means. So you don't read the subtitle to understand the Spanish in that movie, but you learn what it means by watching the movie, other parts of the movie, maybe other people speaking in English or repeating or so, whatever. So this is probably the first time that a movie that uses a lot of a different language did not include any subtitles, which is a very interesting, I think, very interesting thing. Here I have a picture of Rita Moreno in this new movie. She looks like she aged pretty well, you know. It has been 60 years since she won an Oscar for her role, Anita, in that first movie. But in the second movie, of course, she is no longer that young and feisty Puerto Rico woman, but she is a very wise older Puerto Rican woman in this movie. And I think she's called Victoria or something. Anyway, it's not the same role that she's playing. Of course, that's what you would expect. And of course, I haven't seen this movie, but it is already on, and you could find it somewhere. It's both in the theater and on maybe Netflix or Amazon or somewhere else. That's a streaming service. The next word is atrocity. Atrocity is 暴行 It could mean something that's countable or uncountable, 就是可以数还是不能数如果是 uncountable, you don't put a plural of it, but if it's countable, then you can change it to a plural word. So it means extremely cruel act, a horrible or horrid act of injustice, the quality or state of being atrocious. Atrocious is the adjective of the noun atrocity. Enormous wickedness, extreme criminality or cruelty. So you get the idea that it means very, very bad, unfair, or violent, or cruel, or wicked, or horrid thing, okay? What I can say, for example, is how the Japanese came during the Second World War to China and committed a lot of atrocity. One of them could be the rape of Nanking, that is Nanjing 大屠杀, things that are extraordinarily violent and unfair and cruel. we call that an atrocity. Of course, such things happen more often than regular times. They happen during the war, because war by itself is an atrocity. And the next word is fortitude, 坚韧不拔. So you have this very strong spirit, and not just spiritually, but also physically, this very strong attitude or inspiration to go through some very hard situation. That's called you have the fortitude to take you through the atrocity or something terrible. The next word is abdicate. Abdicate is 退位或者逊位, and abdication is the noun of it. Abdicate is the verb. And of course, the first thing we think of is King Edward VIII. He was born in 1894 and he died in 1972. And in his very long life, he was king of UK, United Kingdom, for 1 year. He became the king on January 20th, and he abdicated on December 11th. Both happened in the year 1936. It was a very big thing, but it was way before I was born. I don't know how many of you remember it, because that would mean you're more than 85 years old now. Okay. Here's a picture of him. He was Prince of Wales. Before he became the king, he was Prince of Wales. Being Prince of Wales in England means you are the crown prince and you are the future king of England. Of course, England is only part of UK. UK is a much larger country that includes England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. In 1919, the UK also included the entire island of Ireland, but Ireland became independent in 1922. So when he became the king of, the king of UK, Ireland was already an independent country, no longer part of UK, except for the very northern tip. There are 6 counties in the northern part of Ireland that still belong to the United Kingdom. Okay. And we look at him, and he was quite a young, handsome gentleman. And he really is kind of narcissistic, which means that he cares about himself, how he looks and how he behaves very much. I've read his autobiography. There was a chapter about how he looks. He prefers to be photographed from one side instead of the other side. That's why when his portrait was going to be printed in the money, the currency, the real paper money, or to be engraved on the coins, he disliked the tradition of having his one side. I forgot which side he prefers. He discussed in great detail about he fought with the administrators of the kingdom, how his portrait should go, and he was not happy. So there were very many things. During that year, he was the king of England. He had a lot of run-ins with the tradition, with the system, and so on and so forth. So when he wanted to marry this divorced American woman, Wallis Simpson, that was his wife's name. during that year, he was still a bachelor. He became the king, and he was fighting with the establishment in many, many ways. And he decided to abdicate because in his address to the country, he said, without the love, without the woman I love standing beside me, helping me to be the king, I could not carry on my duty as the king. That's why I announced my abdication. That was a big news, and the UK really got a severe blow. Their prestige, their face, they lost a lot of face by having a king to announce abdication. That was quite a face-losing thing for the country. And at that time, the country was quite in turmoil already because Hitler went into power in 1933. And the UK and France were trying very hard to accommodate Hitler. Hitler wants this and that, and they try to let Hitler have something so that they could live with Hitler. And now comes the king who suddenly just abdicated. That was a very, very difficult year for that country. On top of that, this guy and his new wife in 1937, which is right after he abdicated, he went to Germany and he met with Adolf Hitler, which is a no-no for any English citizen, but he being just last year still the king of England and the UK, it is really a bad thing for their propaganda. So the country UK, after losing him, they not only forbid him from ever coming into any contact with the country or with anyone of his family. He had to sign off all the rights. He had to leave this country and move to Paris for the rest of his life. He had not only receiving no money from the monarch, but also he could not see his parents or his siblings or anyone. Yeah, he is an outcast, and the country was trying to defend herself against Nazi Germany. And here you are, he with his new wife visiting Adolf Hitler. That is a very bad press. Okay. And that was in 1937. And his family painted him as an isolationist. Here I have the word already typed here. They called him an isolationist or a Nazi sympathizer. We cannot say he is or is not such a person, but his family certainly tried their best to characterize him as being an isolationist, which means he is a traitor of the country, because the country is going to fight Germany for many years to come, while he is playing a very friendly role with Nazi Germany. So, but of course, everything he ever did since he abdicated, he was painted as a very bad person by his old family. And there's a lot of bitterness between them. As we would say, there was bad blood between them. That means they just don't get along ever since he left. But he could travel to the United States. Here is him, where he is already quite old, 1970, with his wife, Wallace Simpson, and the president, Richard Nixon. They all dressed up in very nice clothing at the party. He is welcome as a celebrity all over the world, but he could not go back to his country. This is a word I mentioned, callous, when I talk about Charles V of Spain and of Holy Roman Empire. Charles V was the emperor of Holy Roman Empire, 神圣罗马帝国的皇帝, huh? And in this Verdi's opera, Ernani, I mentioned that in this opera, in the beginning, the emperor was callous, he's cool, and 冷酷可以 well 冷酷就是冷酷哈麻木 so he's very much by himself when he was courting this beautiful young woman in this opera whose name is last time I was having difficulty remembering her name. I think it's not Myra, but it's something similar to that. Maybe. Anyway. But Ermani is the bandit who had the love of that woman, and they were going to marry. But on the night that Charles V was elected to be the emperor of Holy Roman Empire, he was executed because of his past transgression. This bandit did something, of course, 他是一个强盗了哈 so he did a lot of bad things, but Charles V was very lenient to him until the last scene. On the day Charles V became the real emperor, he reminded Ernani that he owes his life to the emperor, so he was executed at the end of the movie. But that's maybe not the real story. It's not a real true story. It was just in a novel written by Victor Hugo. Victor Hugo was the novelist who wrote Les Miserables, which is more famous than any other stories that he wrote. 就是悲惨世界 Okay, here we just want to mention this word callous. It's a bad word to describe someone who is not kind and fuzzy. In the same sentence in which we described Charles V using the word callous, we also use another word, which is cynical. Cynical is you don't have a kind heart or tolerance toward other people. When other people did something, maybe they did something good, you would say, oh, that's because he could make money on it. That is a very cynical attitude. If you look at everything, especially about good things, using a different way to look at a good thing as if it's not out of a person's kindness, then your attitude is called cynical. Also, in the same sentence, we encounter the word clement. Clement that sentence was used to describe Charles V, for he changed from a callous and a cynical person to a warm and clement person. Clement means 好心肠 Often when we say, oh, it's a nice day today, then we would use the word clement. It means it is a very warm and very friendly weather. The day with the sun, warm sun, and no rain or snow or whatever. So if you do go to work, I guess most of you don't go to work anymore. And if there was a snow that made it impossible for you to go to work, then you would be taking the day off due to inclement weather. Inclement weather means the weather is bad. So when you go to work, you go to work every day, but except for your sick leave or your vacation time or due to inclement weather. That's when you learn this word inclement. If you have seen Mozart's opera La Clemenza di Tito, that word clemenza means this 慈悲, that's Italian word, La Clemenza di Tito. That is about a king whose name is, or an emperor, a Roman emperor called Titus. Tito is an Italian name for Titus. Well, Titus is also Italian, but maybe it's a Latin word, okay? So when you think that there was a man called Tito in Yugoslavia, he was the ruler or dictator of Yugoslavia during the time, during the war, Cold War time, when the United States and the Soviet Union were fighting a Cold War for many, many decades. Tito of Yugoslavia was the, you may say, president or dictator of Yugoslavia, 就是南斯拉夫的 maybe 总理, okay? So he was famous as the name Tito. That's a name he picked, but that was not his original name. I think he was Joseph something else. Anyway, the reason he picked Tito as his name was because Tito was a very powerful Roman emperor who was very successful and very cruel, actually. So you may have heard the name Tito as a ruler of Yugoslavia, but he actually took that name from a Roman emperor. Okay. I was going to talk a lot about Inquisition as one of the subjects, but I thought it was too dry, so I just introduced it as one of the word in the vocabulary. Inquisition is a kind of 审讯, but it's religious. It is usually called Holy Inquisition because it is conducted by Catholic Church. And it's during the medieval time. They want to secure their power. They want to enforce their power over all the regular people. So if anyone speak of something that is different from the church policy or dogma, they would conduct an inquisition of heresy. Heresy 就是说是异教或者是邪教. Because the Catholic Church consider themselves as being the only true religion in their world. So whether it's outside the world or inside their world, if somebody say something that the church does not approve, they would give him hell. They would consider this person a heretic, or they would have an inquisition of heresy on this person. So this person can be, for example, Muhammad of Islam religion. That's certainly what they would consider as someone who's not within their church and it needs to be punished. Or someone within their church but not towing their line. If the church says the sun revolves around the earth, then any scientist that says differently is a heretic and will be punished for that. So this is a very cruel inquisition, and it got very, very infamous, which means a bad reputation. Infamous. Last time I remember, I said FDR, who is the president of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. FDR made a speech after Pearl Harbor, and he said this day will remain in history as an infamy, the day of infamy for the United States was the day Japan invaded Pearl Harbor. That is the word infamy. That's why I'm going to write it here, infamy. So famous is very well known for something good, and the infamy is to be known for something bad. Okay, so the church really got a very bad name for conducting very cruel Holy Inquisition on many different fronts. Of course, they consider the other religions as a heresy, but they also consider scientists who use proven experimental true experiments to say something against the church, then they are the enemy of the church. And if they say the Pope is too corrupted, that is wrong. You cannot say anything bad about the Pope. The Catholic Church has this kind of rule, or their law, that says the church, the Pope is never wrong. What's the word for it? Infallible. Okay, the word is called infallible. In their law, a pope is infallible. What that means, no matter what the pope does or say, it can never be wrong. Okay, but this law was challenged and cast away during the time of John Paul II, our beloved John Paul II. He declared that the Pope is not infallible. But of course, for many decades, many centuries, the Pope was infallible, was considered infallible. That's why whatever the Pope said, no one can challenge the Pope, not even the best scientists such as Galileo. That's where Galileo comes in a little later, because Galileo, being the father of modern science in every way, in many ways, astronomy and physics, and anyway, he did a lot of scientific research. Telescope, he invented a telescope, 就是望远镜 and he observed the Saturn and the Mars and all the planets and the stars, and he concluded that the Earth actually revolves around the sun, not the sun around the Earth. So he went through Holy Inquisition and was branded a heretic. Cases of unrepentant heretics were handed over to the secular courts, which generally resulted in execution or a life sentence. So the church would conduct an inquisition, and if a person repeatedly do not repent, 如果他是 where's my cursor? Okay, here's my cursor. If a heretic is unrepentant, which means this 异教徒, this bad person who did not listen to us, if he repeatedly do not give up his own bad views, then he is handed over to the secular court. A secular court is a non-religious court. There are religious courts and there are non-religious courts, and those non-religious courts are called the secular courts, and they are handed to the regular court system, and they are usually executed. They are killed or they are given a life sentence. So this Inquisition is very, very harsh. And what else are they against? The Jews, of course, because the Jewish people, they used to live happily, harmoniously with the Gentiles or any other religious people. When it comes to the Holy Inquisition, the Catholic Church decided that, the Jewish people living in their community must convert to Catholic faith in order not to be punished. So a lot of Jewish people had to convert. Convert means to change their religion, usually to Catholic Church. Convert is the word that means to change. So they want all the Jewish people and all the Islamic Islamic believers all to convert to Catholic Church members. Okay, this word is being notified by a warning, so this must be a wrong spelling. Infallible, I don't know how. So just keep in mind that is a wrong spelling, probably. So the church was waging a huge war using Holy Inquisition against the scientists, the monarchs. If the king wanted more power than the church, then they are heretics, and the Islamic believers and the Jewish believers, and all these people were targeted by the church because they do not toe the line of the church. When I say toe, I mean 大拇指, toe. If you toe the line of the Catholic Church, that means you put your toe on this line and you do not go outside this line. So the word toe, which means the big toe on your feet, that is a verb for following the line, okay? And that's in the 12th century in France. They also conducted such things for combating religious deviation. Deviation means you don't follow the line. You went away from the line. That is deviate. I know this is going to be difficult, but you should have some knowledge about the Inquisition. From the 12th century to mid-15th century, these Inquisitions are during the medieval Inquisition, and they were conducted by the Catholic Church. But after mid-15th century, it's getting worse because Martin Luther came around in the year 1517. Yeah, I believe that's the year. In the year 1517, Martin Luther announced by posting 95 theses on the door of the church called the Castle Church in Wittenberg, announcing that the Roman Pope and the Holy See, they were corrupted for collecting lots of money from the regular people, and they themselves indulges in a very luxurious lifestyle, eating, drinking, and watching plays, and having a lot of painters and sculptors working for them. All these are not what a true pope should do. After Martin Luther, then the Catholic Church had to fight against the reformers, who are called the Protestants. Here's the word Protestant. Protestants meaning a group of people. Actually, they were within the church, but they were against the Holy See. Holy See. Where is the word Holy See? Okay. Holy See is right here, huh? The Holy See means the administration of the Pope in nowadays in Vatican, but at some time it was not in Vatican. There was a time when there were two popes, and one in Avignon, France, and the other stayed in Italy. But later on, the two sides also merged together. So the Holy See conducted from mid 15th century onward, they conducted those inquisitions are called Roman inquisitions. And also at the same time, you have Spanish Inquisition and the Portuguese Inquisition. There are local, maybe religious groups, archbishops and so on. They conduct inquisitions against people in their community who are especially Jewish or Muslim. And so there are many at different times. They are conducted by different levels of the church inquisitions. Some are called the Holy Inquisition, Medieval Inquisition, and later on they're called the Roman Inquisition, Spanish Inquisition, and the Portuguese Inquisition. And the first time I learned the word was the Spanish Inquisition. So I thought, oh, wow, that must be terrible. And it was in My Fair Lady. There was Professor Ickens. He made an announcement in a very long song called A Hymn to Him. Okay, this is called A Hymn to Him. It's about himself. He was telling his good friend, Colonel Pickering, why he doesn't get married. He said, women are just trouble. They are not logical. They are bad. I will never, ever be with a woman. I would never get married. This is all the reasons. I'd rather go through a Spanish Inquisition than to be married to a woman and suffer all the irrational behavior of a woman. So he would rather go through a Spanish Inquisition, which to many people was a very cruel thing to be subjected to. Okay? I think we have only one more about this. During this time, Spain and Portugal, they not only conducted inquisition in their own country, which is Spain and Portugal, but they also carried out throughout their empires in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. So it's not just within their own small country, it's the entire Latin America and many places like in Goa, India, or in somewhere in Indonesia, Timor, or places like that. So, or Macau, Macau, that's Auman, huh? All these colonies of Spain and Portugal, there were Inquisition there. I've seen a movie with Natalie Portman, who playing a Jew, as she is also a Jew outside the movie. She was playing a very wealthy daughter of a Spanish merchant, but living in Spain during that time, and was thrown in jail for not converting to Catholic faith. And they did not, for a number of centuries, especially from 1492, that is when Isabella and Ferdinand got married in Spain, and Spain got rid of the Moor, the Islamic occupiers in Spain, and they started to enforce Catholic faith very, very strongly, and they conducted Spanish Inquisition all the way through 19th century. Why? Because Spain was thrown out of the Americas. Every place from California all the way to Argentina and what's that? Santiago, Chile, okay, Chile and Peru and Ecuador, all those countries, including the Mesoamerica, 中美洲, all these Spanish colonies became independent, and that Inquisition would stop. Spanish Inquisition would stop at that time, And it's got such a bad name that the Papal States, which is now in Vatican, they decided not to call it Inquisition anymore. They abolished the Inquisition. However, they continue to conduct Inquisition, but under a different name, and it's called the Supreme Sacred Congregation of the Holy Office. It was renamed in 1908. Okay, to make it more lively, I have two pictures of Galileo. This is a painting of Galileo in front of the Holy Office. They accused him of not being a good Catholic because the Catholic took the position that the sun goes around the earth, while he says no. And he had all kinds of scientific proofs that shows you the church was wrong, but he was condemned. And he was sentenced to house arrest for the rest of his life. And he was not allowed to make a speech or write a book or an essay or a dissertation or whatever. He was sentenced to not being able to say anything about his thought until he died. That was very, very cruel, and it's not right for the whole world, for a church to take a stand to quash the very, very respected scientist. It is so wrong. Yeah, it was almost like Donald Trump doing things that he did. Okay, here's a picture, a painting of Galileo. This was it's during his lifetime. This painting was done in 1636, so it should be a good likeness of himself. His full name is Galileo Galilei. So there's a last name Galilei, and his first name is Galileo. However, most people know him as Galileo. And he lived pretty long, actually, about 78 years. But after he was sentenced, a life sentence of house arrest. House arrest 就是在家里，关在家里，而不是关在监牢里哈。House arrest. It's not only that he could not go out, it is he could not speak or write anything about what he thinks, while the world really depended on him to communicate what he thinks, because he is just about the greatest scientist that ever lived. And I have this slide about what he did, but it's too much for you to know, so I put it into a light blue color so you don't have to read it. He was an astronomer, a physicist, an engineer, sometimes described as a polymath, which means he is very good scholar in many, many ways. So it's just not astronomy or physics or engineer, but also in writing or in maybe music or whatever, many different other areas. He was also an expert. And he was from the town of Pisa. If you know Italy, you probably have heard of Pisa, where there is a leaning tower. There 就是斜塔哈，比萨斜塔, and he was born in that town. And he famously conducted some physics experiment on top of that tower, because that tower was leaning, so he could drop things and these things would fall down instead of hitting the side of the tower. So he his experiment was letting go, free falling, 自由落体哈, maybe a ball that is solid or with a ball that is hollow. And the church says the heavier ball would fall down to the earth faster, while the lighter one would not. But Galileo shows that if the two things have the same structure, shape, and so on, like two balls, one is heavier, one is light, then they would reach the ground at the same time. That's why he has this formula for calculating how long it takes for something to free fall to the ground. And if, of course, if you have an iron ball and you have a feather, then the feather would just, because of the friction of the air, would just go down very slowly. However, if they're both in the same shape, then the heavier one and the lighter one would fall down to the earth in the same length of same period of time. He's called the father of observational astronomy, modern physics, the scientific method, and modern science. 他是被称为这些领域的父亲. As I just mentioned, he invented telescope. So using his own telescope, he was able to see clearly all the stars and the planets in the sky much better than any person ever lived. So he's the father of observational astronomy, which means the branch of astronomy, which is 天文学，而他是用观察来讲的天文学哈。And physics and the scientific method and the modern science. He's a very great person. And he says Copernicus was right. Copernicus was a Polish astronomer. He thinks that the Earth rotates around the sun, and Galileo championed this theory. This theory is called heliocentrism. Helio is the sun, while centrism is 以它为中心的意思哈，以太阳为中心的学说就是 heliocentrism, okay, which means Earth rotating daily and revolving around the sun. The matter was investigated by the Roman Inquisition in 1615, which concluded that heliocentrism was foolish, absurd, and heretical. 教堂研究的结果认为他的这种主张是 foolish, absurd, and heretical because it contradicted Holy Scripture. 跟他们的教堂的经文有抵触 okay? It's not even the Bible. I don't think the Bible said anything, but it is the church decided that Aristotle was right. The church, the Catholic Church, loved Aristotle, even though Aristotle was many centuries before Christ. Aristotle was the teacher of Alexander the Great, and Alexander the Great, 亚历山大大帝, probably died in 335 BC, I think, either that or 333. I think it's 335. Anyway, but the church decided that Aristotle was a better scientist, so they took a lot of Aristotle, 亚里士多德, they took the stand of many of Aristotle's, and they decided Copernicus and Galileo were wrong. They were foolish and absurd and heretical. Okay, so he was forced to recant. Recant means you said something, but you have to take that back. You have to say, I was wrong when I said that. Now I don't think that is right. I don't think that's true. So I recant. And that means to take back what you said. Okay. The church forced him to recant, and he spent the rest of his life under house arrest. During that time, he did write something, but he was not allowed to publish them. This is a play written by Bertolt Brecht, who is a very well-known German playwright. 他写了很多剧本, because he was a sympathizer of communism, so he was not famous in Taiwan. We did not condemn him or think he was wrong, but we never celebrated his work. He was a very well-known playwright. One of his work was called Galileo, or The Life of Galileo. And that was written in German, of course, because Bertolt Brecht was a German. And in 1938, when he wrote it, he had not been to other countries. However, in the end, he had to move to other countries. That means he went to United States. And when he went to United States, he worked along with Charles Laughton, who is a British actor, a fat old guy, Charles Laughton. They worked on the script and translated or rewrote his Galileo into English, and they produced it in 1947. I think it's in Chicago or something. Anyway, this picture is a snapshot of the play, but not of the 1947 production. It was a 1971 production. And it's in Berlin, of all the places, because he eventually went back to Germany after the World War II. So 1971, he was in Berlin. Or maybe not, but that was a play. That was a production in Berlin. So after all this, I talked about the church and what the church did, things that are really foolish, absurd, and I wouldn't say heretical, but that's what the church did. So did the church apologize? Yes and no. Okay. In 1990, Cardinal Ratzinger, who was later Pope Benedict XVI, he said, "It would be foolish to construct an impulsive apologetic." He said, even though in hindsight, which we probably agree, Galileo was right and he should not suffer so much under our church, but I think it would be foolish if we very impulsively give him an apology. We should not apologize for our mistake years ago. It would be foolish. That's what Cardinal Ratzinger thought. That was before he would eventually become the Pope, okay? 2 years later, Pope John Paul II actually acknowledged that the church had erred. That means we were wrong in condemning Galileo. In 1992, Pope John Paul II said we were wrong. However, he did not say, "I apologize on behalf of the church that we were wrong." He did not say that, okay? Then in the year 2008, the head of the Church Academy announced a plan to honor Galileo by erecting a statue of him inside the Vatican. So this academy, Pontifical Academy, means the Pope's Academy, Pontifical. Pontifex is the Pope, The Academy of Sciences, of all things, it's a Sciences Academy. They announced that they would put up a statue of Galileo for what he contributed to science. That was in the year 2008. They announced a plan. However, in December of that year, they did celebrate the 400th anniversary of Galileo, but and Benedict XVI, who was a Cardinal Ratzinger, he praised Galileo for his contribution, but a month later they decided not to put up a statue of Galileo inside the Vatican. So they did not actually apologize. Okay. Let's move on with all these things. The vocabulary we have porous, which is full of holes. When we talk about 滤过性病毒, that means this virus can go through a porous earthenware. Okay, and the word vessel can be several things. It is something that holds something, like holding a liquid or holding a fruit basket or holding blood, or a ship. In the old days, in 1300, the word vessel was created to mean a ship, whether it's a boat or a big ship that can transport things on water. That is a vessel. And later on in the 20th century, this word was extended to mean something that can carry things over in the air or in space. So it can be a spacecraft, or it can be an airplane. Such kind of transportation means can be called a vessel, but it was not until 20th century when such a technology was invented. On the other hand, it can be something, if you go to any ethnological museum about native people from the old days, there's bound to be some vessels. They could be carriers of water or holding things like fruits and vegetables in the kitchen. Anything that's in the shape like a vessel, like a ship that contains liquid or other things. It can be a glass or a cup or a bottle or a bowl or a pitcher, a goblet. This kind of thing can be called a vessel. And also a person who's holding a lot of things inside this person, like knowledge and experience. We could say a teacher should be a vessel of knowledge. That means the teacher holds a lot of good things like knowledge and experience and skills in him. So a teacher can be a vessel. And also in biology, it can be a tube in the body of an animal or a plant that transports liquid. For example, people have blood vessels. That means the 血管, whether it's an arterial or vein, 不管是动脉或者静脉的血管，这种管子都可以叫做 vessel. And also in the plant, a plant would absorb water from the roots and then transport it to the leaves and branches. So this kind of ducts, 我们说树就是有管子的这些这些都叫做 vessel. And Neolithic, I don't want to go much into the detail, but Neolithic is 新石器时代, where Neo is new and the lithic is stone. So Neolithic is 新石器时代 because 石器时代有了旧石器时代, middle and so on. Okay. And this word is combustible, and we have internal combustion engine. If you don't drive a hybrid car, you definitely have an internal combustion engine in your car. It was either with gasoline or diesel. It vaporize this fuel in a container, and it lights it up. So by continuously doing this, this engine would push your wheels forward. So this is the word combustible is 易燃的或者一点就会燃了的东西。And you have the external combustion engine that is used in steamboat 轮船或者是汽船. That kind of engine is called the external combustion engine. And these two words we learned from Elsa's song called Let It Go, from the movie, the cartoon, the animated movie Frozen. She was saying it was howling, the wind is howling and swirling outside, and it's so cold, but I'm not afraid. Animation is a word to describe the cartoon that make still pictures into as if to a viewer the thing was moving, not because the pictures was moving, but because there was a series of pictures that were just a little tiny little bit different from each other. So when it's flipping through, when you flip through this, or when the movie was played to you, you see those images as if they were moving, but they were moving because the person who drew it made it that way. Here we have the word estranged. So you could have a father who is estranged from you, or a spouse, or a brother, or a friend. And the word inadvertent, which means that you did not intend for this to happen, but it happened despite of what you wish. And the dinghy is a tiny little boat. Usually it's carried on a big ship, so that when you reach your destination and the big ship cannot dock on the pier, then you would load people or thing on the smaller boat and then transport these things or people on shore. This is called the tender boat. And if you have ever been on any of the ocean cruise ships, you would have been on the tender boat, because almost always, hardly ever, the big ship can be docked next to the dock, and they have to use tender boat to transport people. And of course, it can be used for other things, such as utility dinghies are usually used to move things, and they have their own outboard motor. Okay. Transfer from larger boats, especially when the larger boat cannot dock at the suitably sized port or marina. These are some picture of the dinghies. I don't want to go through this very carefully, but since there are quite a lot of people, Chinese people who are Buddhists, we would encounter some of these words. You would want to tell your English-speaking friend something, but you don't know how it's said. So I am giving you some of these words. Like Buddha is called the Siddhartha Gautama, okay, that's 释迦牟尼哈。And 它有苦啊、欲啊、无明、无常、无我这些，Dharma and Sangha and Paramita. I don't know all of them myself, but you can, if you want to, just Google for them and find out what they are. But Diamond Sutra is a name which is pretty easy to remember. It is 金刚经. 金刚经 is most valuable in 大乘或者禅这一支的佛教. So in China and Japan and several neighboring countries, we are considered 大圣, which is Mahayana Sutra. Mahayana 是大圣，而 Mahayana 的 Sutra 就是大圣的经哈。那这个 Sutra 呢，就是经的意思哈。Sutra 跟 Diamond Sutra are words you probably should learn. 至于小圣呢 because it's not in China or Japan, so we do not come across it often enough. 大圣 means this vehicle is big. That means the person who reached a higher level, they have the ability to take the lesser qualified people with them into a better world. While 小圣 means you just do your best to cultivate your own self, and you cannot take anyone else with you. So 我们讲到大圣的话 there are bodhisattva. We have 观音菩萨、弥勒菩萨，还有什么其他的菩萨哈 They are halfway between ordinary people and the Buddha, so they have the capability of taking a lot of people to go higher up with them. And there are many 大圣 the branches. They are at the bottom of this slide. They are 禅 and 净土、日莲、法华天大、天台、真言. All these branches of Buddhism that are somewhere as a part of Mahayana, but not Hinayana. Okay, and they are in Nepal, Malaysia, Bhutan, China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and Taiwan. On the other hand, Hinayana, that branch, the lesser vehicle, they started to go to Sri Lanka, and then they go to Myanmar. They were in India already, and Indonesia probably. Yeah, some of those Southeastern Asian countries, they were believers in Hinayana, not Mahayana. All these words I'm not gonna give to you, but this word, if you insist on learning this word, bodhisattva is pusa. And there are so many bodhisattvas that are worshipped by 大乘佛教. And Arhat is one level lower than Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva, those people are very much up on the ladder, while Arhats are a little lower, and they sometimes come in groups of 8 or 6 or 16 or 18 or 100 or even 500. 500罗汉, so they can get together in large group and go to the Buddha's lecture or things like that. So one way is for you to consider these arhats as Christian saints. They were not Jesus Christ himself, but they were saint because they achieved a certain level of accomplishment on the ladder of that religion. Maybe they are apostles. Apostles means they were one of the 12 disciples of Jesus Christ. There were only 12 of them. However, there are other disciples who were not one of the 12. They were also saints because they were early disciples or the leaders of the faith. And there are detailed regulation as to who can become a saint, who can be canonized. And we talked about that sometime earlier. Since I did not prepare this just before the class, I had to copy this site in order to do it. this, and I will have to stop share and then reshare. It's not working. Okay.
William.
Okay. I am going to go back, which is here, and new share. Okay. New share is which one? Looks like they are the same. Okay.
Ernest Hanley, 1849 to 1903. Invictus. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
Okay. Ooh, I have to stop that. Ooh. Okay, I think it stopped, so I can now do something else. Okay, share screen. I think it's this one. Can you see the PowerPoint now? I hope I have not lost you. Anybody speaking?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So you can see the PowerPoint, right?
Yes.
Okay. Out of the night that covers me, black as a pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. This was a poem my eldest sister learned in high school. At that time, they were reciting this, and William Wordsworth and several other poets, Longfellow. But when I was in high school, we stopped learning those things, so we had no knowledge about these English poets. But this is one that my sister learned in high school. And it has four simple right here, four slides. Each one has four sentences, and each one has the same number of syllables. So it's a very standard kind of poem, and it has not too many difficult words. So it is supposed to hit you on the head, like out of the night that covers me. Each sentence is this many syllables. And he described it in very graphic detail about what he went through. He was in a pit, very dark, but from pole to pole, means it's a tunnel from North Pole to South Pole. So it's a hole that's very, very long and dark. But he thanks whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. He thanked God that he was given this unconquerable soul. And that is the name of the title of this poem, Invictus, which means I am victorious and no one can control me. Nobody can conquer my spirit. That's what Invictus means. Victus is victory, and Invictus is not. No victory over me. I am unconquerable. Okay, that's the first stanza, and there are four of them. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Well, this goes one step further because now we see blood. The bludgeoning 是等于是乱棒，把他打得满头都是血哈。 but he is unbowed. 他的头也不低头哈。In the fell clutch of circumstance, this is a little harder to understand, and I got to start at the bottom. That says it means cruelly. 那个 fell means cruelly, and the clutch means the claws. Huh? This fate that is so terrible, it has claws like a lion or tiger or a ferocious eagle. They have this very strong claws that caught me in this cruel position 哈。所以我在这个 circumstance 之下呢 I have not winced. Winced 就是眨眼睛哈。他说我眼睛睁得大大的，根本就 I did not wince 哈 and I did not cry a lot. 也没有叫，也没有眨眼睛哈。Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed 哈。在这个 chance， 在这个命运的鞭打之下，我的头上是流着血，可是我头并没有低头哈。I did not bow my head. Beyond this place of wrath and tears, 在这些愤怒跟眼泪之外呢 looms but the horrors of the shade. 在这个不但是我在这个 wrath and tear 之内，而且在它的外面还是 horror 啊。即使我挣扎出去，也是不断的有 horror， 都是有可怕的事。But yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. There are several of these lines that are eternally famous. For example, finds and shall find me unafraid. 不管这种痛苦多么的长久哈 after years of menace 这种威胁哈 you people or you or others will find me unafraid. 你不管多久我还是不怕，不但是现在不怕，以后我也不怕这个是表示非常的坚决的意思哈。And here comes the last one, which is also very, very famous. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. 不管是这个门有多窄不管是这个惩罚我的这个宣判是多么的充满了 accusation 跟 delivered bad sentences to me. 我呢 I'm the master of my fate, and I am the captain of my soul. These two lines are the most famous. 不管这个情况怎么样的错坏，我还是我的命运的主人，我是我的灵魂的船长Okay, so you have to remember at least these two lines. I'm the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul. So what is it that caused him to write such a powerful poem? And for hundreds of years, people who were suffering always turn to him and they recite this poem to keep their spirit high. They say, these words so inspired me that I could endure that hardship, no matter you're Nelson Mandela or someone who was experiencing unbearable, terrible fate or punishment or bludgeoning. Everything that's landed on you, you are not afraid after years and years. You are still the master of your own fate and the captain of your soul. Okay, here we have a picture of William Ernest Hanley. He was born in 1849 and died in 1903. And he wrote this in 1875, and he published this in his first volume of poem in 1888. So he's a late bloomer of sort. He wrote this, which is so powerful, but he did not publish until 13 years later in his very first volume of poems. So he was not the world's famous poet, but this poem is world famous. Yeah, I tried to read it several times. It's not very difficult. The story behind all this is what he suffered during all those years. When he was 16 years old, his left leg required amputation. 他的左腿要被锯掉 due to complications arising from tuberculosis. At that time, 这个肺结核是一个很普遍的病，很多人都死于肺结核哈。Tuberculosis, we sometimes call it TB because it started with the word two and B, tuberculosis, TB. We say 肺结核, but it's not only something that affects your lungs. It can be, for example, a bone, 骨头哈, for example, in his case, it's probably his leg that he had to amputate, 就是要砍掉、截掉一个腿哈，他必须就是说已经没有救了。The doctor said there is no other cure. You have to carve your leg off so that it does not extend. The bad area would not extend any farther. And later on, his other leg also suffered the same problem. And he went to several doctors and they all said he had to amputate that other leg as well. So, excuse me, I need to... I'm sorry, I usually prepare 2 glasses of water before the class, but today I went somewhere else for lunch and I was not prepared. So in the year 1873, he went to Edinburgh. At that time, Edinburgh has the best surgeons in the whole world. And he sought the help of a surgeon called Joseph Lister. And this doctor was able to save his remaining leg after multiple surgical intervention. He conducted surgery on his other leg many times and eventually saved that leg. So he was limping with that leg because he lost one leg already. While he was in the hospital, in the infirmary, infirm 就是有病的意思 infirmary 就是医护室或者是医院的意思 He was moved to write the verses that became the poem. He wrote this poem while he was recovering from those multiple surgeries. He was a British poet, writer, critic, and editor in late Victorian England. He died in 1903. And Queen Victoria was a queen for more than 60 years. So William Ernest Hanley was born probably just before Queen Victoria became, I think Queen Victoria became the queen before William Ernest Hanley was born, because the Irish famine was in 1847 to 51. At that time, Victoria was called the famine queen, because so many people in Ireland died. Though he wrote several books of poetry, Hanley is remembered most often for his 1875 poem Invictus. He was famous for only this one poem. He is a literary person and always there with some other writers and so on. So he was also famous for being these 2 things. One is Robert Louis Stevenson wrote the book Treasure Island, 金银岛. In that story about a ship, a boy, and some pirates, there was a character called Long John Silver, who is a pirate with one leg. And Stevenson wrote that story based on him, on William Hanley, because he was a good friend with Hanley. So he wrote a story featuring Long John Silver, who is a one-legged pirate. And also, another famous thing is Hanley's daughter called Margaret. Margaret Hanley inspired James M. Barrie to name the girl in Peter Pan Wendy. Margaret was called Wendy, or she had a difficulty pronouncing the word Rand or something. So she was called Wendy because of that. And if you know Peter Pan, you know there was a main character, Wendy, who is very sensible, took care of all the lost boys, but she decided to go back home after a long time to grow up, because Peter Pan refuses to grow up. Well, we call Peter Pan 小飞侠. And James Barrie is the writer, I was going to say the playwright, who wrote the play Peter Pan. But it became so famous that James Barrie later wrote a book on it. So Peter Pan was a book after it was a theater play. And all that happened in the very beginning of last century. So this is about Invictus. I already told you the story about him. This is about the name Wendy used to be a man's name since 1615 in England, but 300 years later, James Barrie decided to name that girl Wendy, and now it has become very, very popular girl's name. For example, Rupert Murdoch's wife, the Chinese wife that he divorced, was called Wendy Deng. Okay. As to this, I collected a lot of these examples of where people quoted the lines in this poem, and they're just too numerous. Hundreds of people were quoting this thing, so I will just go over one or two of them. One is Churchill. He said, "We are going into war with Germany in 1941." That was before Pearl Harbor. Okay, he said this war is going to be bloody and it's very difficult, and we have to win this war, and we have to go into this war. He said, "We are still masters of our fate. We are still captains of our soul." And Nelson Mandela, who was in prison, I think it was for 19 years or something, a very, very, very long period of time. He was in this Robben Island prison doing hard labor, and he also recited this poem as he was inspired by him. And the next one is Aung San Suu Kyi, who was the Nobel Prize winner, who was in Myanmar, or Burmese opposition leader. She also mentioned that how her father, who was a big thing in their country, her father was on their paper money. That's how big he was. And his father was inspired by this poem. And we have London bombing, the newspaper in 2005. They say, "We are bloody but unbowed." And in Barack Obama's speech at Nelson Mandela's funeral, he also quoted the last two lines. And Timothy McVeigh, who blew up the Alabama City Federal building and was executed for that. He also mentioned that we the Christians, and he considered those anyway, he thinks he's on this holy war for white supremacy. That's Timothy McVeigh. And John Lewis, his sister, he's a House of Representative member, and he also read this poem quite often. And I'm going to not read all these. There's Oscar Wilde, there's C.S. Lewis, and W.E.B. Du Bois, and many, many films like in Casablanca, King's Row. I particularly like this one, actually. I started to memorize this poem when I watched Ronald Reagan in this movie called The King's Row, which in Chinese, we call it 金石盟. When he was a football player, his character in the movie, there was a sadistic doctor. His leg was perfectly well, but the doctor cut that leg off because the doctor liked to have patient cry when suffer the pain. So his leg was lost for no good reason. But he became very depressed. But the hero in that movie encouraged him by reciting this whole poem to him. And in the end, he was able to get out of his bed and try to live on. Okay. And there are many, many others. So we're not going to mention this. It's endless row of quotes from these things. The one that I matched with this wonderful poem is杨万里桂圆铺. 桂圆铺是一个 name of the town. 这个铺 can also be written as the last line says. There are two ways to write this word, and it's the name of a small town. And he says, 万山不许一溪奔，兰得溪声日夜喧。道德前头山脚尽，堂堂溪水出前村. He said, 10,000 of mountains blocked the way so that the creek could not flow downward. One after another, even though the first one did not succeed, there were tens of thousands of such huge mountains tried their best to block this stream from flowing downward. And the result of this is that day and night you could hear this water very noisily flow through these mountains. And up at last, when this stream comes to the end of these mountains, when these mountains can no longer block this stream, this grand stream was able to flow forward and emerge from 桂圆铺, this little village. So before this village, you have thousands of mountains blocking that creek. So the creek was making all kinds of noise and could not come out and flow freely. But it persevered. It went through all the hardship, going through all the mountains, and in the end, this creek was able to emerge free. This is to also just a similar poem to inspire people, no matter how hard other people try to stop you. If you persevere, if you work hard enough. Let me put down this word. Ooh, where is my cursor? Okay, the word is persevere. Persevere 就是说拼命的坚持下去而终于成功的意思哈。And this poem was loved by 胡适. That's where I come to talk to you about 胡适. In the year 1960, the publisher of a magazine called The Free China, Lei Zhen, he was arrested with 3 other people by the government because he gathered lots of signatures from people, famous people who are against Chiang Kai-shek for trying to earn a 3rd term of presidency. So the Constitution says a person can only be 2-term president, and after that he should not do that. He should stop trying to put his name again on the ballot so that he can earn a 3rd term. This is to defend the Constitution. Lei Zhen was able to gather lots of people's signature, including Hu Shi's signature, to force Chiang Kai-shek from gaining his 3rd term. Of course, they failed because Chiang Kai-shek was in power and was very much in power to put them all in jail. And he decided to put 4 people who run that magazine and did this thing to jail for 10 years, actually. This is nowadays it's considered a very, very terrible thing to do in the international opinion arena. However, at that time, it was not uncommon for him to do that. And as I travel through many, many, many countries, I have seen those presidents who first helped write the Constitution that limit their term to 2, and they, after being the president for 2 terms, decided to change the Constitution and allow themselves to have a 3rd term. It happens in half the countries in the world, if I may say so. I have been to so many different countries and saw that happen. But when it happened to me in 1960, I just did not know better. I don't know anything. I just heard my father talk about it. And it left a very strong impression on me. Even though as a child, I went to all the rallies during which I would say, may the president live to 10,000 years, many, many times, but that was little me at that time. If it were now, I would not have gone to those rallies. And the 4 people who run that magazine were arrested by Jinbei Zongbu, and one of them was probably tortured, and in the end he confessed that he was an agent, a communist spy. And because he did that, all the other people became accomplice. They were friends of him, doing things together, and they were also spies, or not necessarily in name, but they were accomplices. They 知匪不报, that is, they knew someone among them was a spy for the enemy, but they did not report to the government. So they were sentenced to imprisonment. Lei Zhen himself was he was imprisoned for 10 years. He did not get early release. And he had 2 very important missions he wanted to accomplish, and as a result, he did not succeed. He was not able to carry out his 2 goals. One is to run this free press, 自由中国 magazine, and to organize an opposition party. He says, as a democratic country, there should be at least one opposition. The country should not be 一党的党政, there should be more than one party. So he wants to organize or found an opposition. We call that opposition, 就是反对党. So he was not able to do that. And he was in prison for about a year when his birthday came about, probably less than a year. And Hu Shi wrote this poem and sent it to Lei Zhen in prison, tell him not to be depressed or to give up his goals. And here's in his own word: 万山不许一溪奔，难得溪声日夜喧。道则前头山脚尽，堂堂溪水出前村。南宋大诗人杨万里的《桂园谱》绝句，我最爱读，今写给晋桓老弟，祝他的65岁生日。And he signed the 誓之50年7月, so it's 1961, the second year Lei Zhen was in prison. So he calls Jing Huan his younger brother. That was 61. Maybe he was not younger. Anyway, here are two portrait photographs of Hu Shi. One was in 1917. That was around the time, the year before 五四运动. He was a leader in 五四运动. Among the things they protest about are they need a representation in Palace Conference, not Palace, Paris. Paris after the war in 1918. That's why I say a year before that. In 1918, the West won the First World War, and China was on the side of, English, French, and the U.S. on this side. So they are the winners, and we need to. We sent representative to, I think it was our 外交部长. I don't know, probably Zhang Liangyong, not Zhang Liangyong, that was the writer of Kung Fu novels. Anyway, they were there, but they were ignored because they just gave Shandong, which used to be the colony of Germany, they gave it to Japan instead of giving it back to China. And we were very, very angry. That was 1 or 2 years after that. I believe 五四运动 was the year 1919, which is the year they actually signed the Paris Conference treaty. And the one on the right-hand side, 1961, he was about to die. Yeah, he died in 1962. People also always say, people in this country, they would say, I remember the day Armstrong landed on the moon. And some people would say, I remember when I heard President Kennedy was assassinated. To me, a similar experience was that I heard on the TV that Hu Shi died. He had a stroke while he was giving a speech, and he died. And that's the only thing I remember from my childhood. That's how much I liked him. He was very respected in many ways. He was a scholar, and he went to Cornell or Columbia for post degrees, and his advisor was John Dewey. That's why I say he probably went to Columbia. John Dewey was probably in Cornell. So he first went to Cornell because he wants to study agriculture, because China was such an agricultural oriented country. But eventually he studied philosophy, and he learned the way to experiment, the scientific method that was started by Galileo, that says if you want to do some research, you have to experiment to prove it's wrong, it's right in order to do that. However, Hu Shi is so respected that he was involved politically, even though he was not very political person. But in our country's darkest moment, he agreed to be the ambassador to United States from 1938 to 1942, because he was able to conduct diplomacy in a very respected way. And his English, of course, is good, and he is well-respected scholar internationally. And when Chiang Kai-shek escaped from mainland China to Taiwan, he was able to persuade Hu Shi to become 外交部部长, a minister of foreign affairs, when he was losing the war to Mao Zedong. But Hu Shi did not do, and probably only did for 5 or 6 months, and then he quit. Then he became the director, I don't know if it's called director, of Academia Sinica, 中央研究院. And he is one of the most famous person earning the most number of doctor's degrees. Most of them were honorary degrees. So he was not student of that school or college, but he was given an honorary degree because people respected him. I think he could teach the student there to be a good citizen of the world. So he had 36 such degrees, and most of them were in America or in Europe. Then here's another poem by Yang Wanli, which is a sequel. So after he passed by Gui Wenpu, he went to a village downstream. It's called the Songyuan Chen Cui Qi Gong Dian. Okay, and he wrote this follow-up. He says, 莫言下岭便无难，转得行人错喜欢。正入万山圈子里，一山放出一山蓝。It is to tell people that don't be so happy or to be so proud that you finally were able to fight through all these difficult places, those mountains that are blocking you, and you don't think that you are home free. You can now happily coasting forward because you are still in the domain of 10,000 difficult mountains. If one mountain lets you go free, there's another one coming up. So you should always not put down your guard. Put down your guard is to 放下你的艰难困苦的奋斗的精神，而要永远都要努力的奋斗。This is a sequel. So if you want this thing, you can either press a snapshot or a screenshot, or you can just Google 莫言下岭 or 杨万里. You can always find this one. Okay. And I'll say a few words about Yang Wanli. He was not a happy person, and I mean, he worked very hard. He was successful in passing the exam, but he is for the war. He's on the side of Yue Fei. There are two sides in court, and they are losing to the other side, which is the side for peace. He is for the government to wage battles against the Manchurian people, and the emperor did not like him, so he was not going places. He did not go get a high position, and every time he said something, the emperor was not happy. So he just quit and went home, and he did not come out of retirement for 15 years. Then he died, of course. That's why he wrote all those poems, to encourage himself and to encourage other like-minded people to always try hard, because there are so many people who are against you, and they will just not let you go through. Okay, so that's him. He has a style of writing poetry of his own. In the beginning, he tried to write this way or that way, trying to copy this or that, and lots of great poems he tried to imitate. And one day, as he wrote in his autobiography, he said, one day in 50年, I suddenly realized that I could just go my own way. I don't have to follow the Tang Dynasty. I don't have to follow these current famous poets, because I can write in my own way. So Yan Yu, who is a critic of poetry, he said Yang Wanli has his own style, which he called the Cheng Zhai Ti, because Yang Wanli's style 就是我们所有的文人他都有他自己的名字，然后他有他的 style， 就是他的别号或者他的其他的名字哈。杨万里的别号就叫做成斋 ，and it's probably he named his study 成斋哈。This is a study of truthful, honest, or genuine expression or whatever. So this Cheng is hard to translate, but he named his study Cheng Zhai. So his style is called Cheng Zhai Ti by other people. He wrote very humorously and very lively and natural. It doesn't show that he worked very hard to come to certain words. In Tang Dynasty, some people have to 推敲 each word in order to settle on the final poem, and they would 推敲 推或者敲 that's two different action for this 声敲月下门 so they were very hard trying to come up with a good word, so they were called the 苦诗，像孟郊啊或者是什么人 they were called the bitter poets, because the poems they wrote comes very hard to them. However, Yang Wanli is totally different. His poems look so spontaneous. 好像一想到就是写出来就是他we call that 很自然的叫做 spontaneous. This word is naturally. He writes poems in a very natural way, very humorous and lively way. And Qian Zhongshu, who was during right now we call him mainland China poet, but he started during the Second World War. He was in Xinan Lianda, and he was very respected scholar in Chinese literature. And he says Yang Wanli is a very important key point and inflection point. The Chinese poems made a significant turn when Yang Wanli started to write poems, because he writes so spontaneous, refreshing, and 泼辣, which is very hard to translate, very spicy and very aggressive. And in comparison, at his time, he was one of the four later 南宋诗人 great ones. They are 陆游, 范成大, and there was You Mao and Yang Wanli. The four of them were the four great Southern Song poets, and compared to him, Lu You and Fan Chengda were very conservative or steady, and they don't jump around, huh? But even though Yang Wanli was very lively, still he likes to follow Huang Tingjian 的主张. What is Huang Tingjian 的主张呢? He says every word in your poem must come from somewhere else. It has to come from something other famous poets already used. I think that is ridiculous. I like spontaneous way to write what you think, but of course I can't write any poems at all, so it's not my opinion doesn't count. But I hate to read poems that 无一字无来处, this is too confining, and it cannot possibly really express how you feel, So Yang Wanli's 诗, in Qian Zhongshu's opinion, is a 白话诗 because it's not so diligently following the rules. However, he is still 白话诗里面比较古雅的, He's more elegant. Being elegant means you have to pause to find a more polite way to say it. So he is still pausing to write poems in the polite way, but he is one of the revolutionary character. Okay, this is all I have for today, and I hope it's entertaining enough. Okay, let me do this so I can see you. Okay, I think I will have to stop the recording. Anybody has anything to say? I don't know. I cannot choose to quit recording or YouTube. So I don't know if it was successful. I don't know. I'll just let it go, but I will sign off if Huiling is still around. I am being apprenticed today to be my own host, and we opened it a little late in the beginning. Okay, anyone wants to say anything?
Okay, thank you for
谢
Joe.
谢老师，
谢谢，圣诞快乐，
Yeah,
新年
yeah,
快
yeah.
乐
圣诞快乐.
We
Yeah.
will have no class before Christmas or New Year. Our first
Yeah.
one was after New Year. Yeah.
OK，
I wish you all a happy New Year and a Merry Christmas. Okay.
Thank you，
Thank you.
谢谢，
Thank you.
谢谢，
谢谢。
Bye.
拜。
How to